Taking flight, a stand for justice. Some journeys begin long before you step onto a plane. For Darius, this flight wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about confronting a battle he'd seen too many times before. A simple seat, a quiet moment, and then a test. Would he accept being pushed aside, or would he stand his ground? Where are you watching from today? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters. Chapter 1. The Weight of Assumption. The airport was a kaleidoscope of humanity. Heels clicked a staccato rhythm against the polished terrazzo floors. Voices, a blend of anticipation and fatigue, formed a low hum punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter or the urgent squawk of a boarding announcement. The air, thick with the competing scents of freshly brewed coffee and jet fuel, clung to everything. Darius moved through the throng with practiced ease. Years of navigating a world that constantly underestimated him had honed his senses. His posture was relaxed, almost languid, but his eyes were sharp, observant. He noticed the small things, who watched, who ignored, who made assumptions based on nothing more than appearances. At the first-class gate, he presented his ticket. The attendant, a woman with a tight smile and a uniform that seemed a size too small, took it. Her eyes flickered from the ticket to his face. A pause almost imperceptible but instantly recognizable to Darius. It was a pause that spoke volumes, a micro-expression of disbelief, a silent question of his worthiness. He'd seen it before, countless times in different settings, from upscale restaurants to exclusive boutiques. But she recovered quickly, plastering on a professional smile. "Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Enjoy your flight." She scanned the ticket and gestured him through. Inside the plane, the air was cooler, cleaner. The scent of rich leather mingled with the sterile freshness of recirculated air. He found his row, settled into the wide, plush seat, and exhaled. The weight of the world, a constant companion, seemed to ease slightly here, in this sanctuary of privilege. He was a successful lawyer, a partner at a prestigious firm, a man who had earned his place in this world. But still, he faced these subtle challenges, these insidious reminders that he was somehow other, that he didn't quite fit the mold. Then, a shadow fell over him. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with silvering hair and an expensive watch glinting on his wrist, loomed beside him. The man exuded an air of entitled assurance, a confidence born of privilege. "You're in my seat," the man said, his voice edged with annoyance. Darius glanced at his ticket, then back at the man. "No, I'm not. This is 2A. Before the man could respond, a flight attendant appeared, her smile polite but firm. "Sir, would you mind switching seats? There was a slight mistake in the booking, and this gentleman has priority status." There was again the assumption, the invisible push, the subtle implication that he had somehow wandered into a space that wasn't meant for him. He took a slow breath, fighting back the familiar surge of anger. "I paid for this seat," Darius said, his voice calm and even. "I'm not moving." The flight attendant's smile flickered, a flicker of surprise and something else he couldn't quite decipher. The other passengers, sensing a disturbance, began to watch, some pretending not to notice, others openly curious. This was a moment, and Darius knew how moments like these played out. He could back down, avoid the confrontation, and accept the injustice. But something inside him refused to yield. He had fought too hard, for too long, to simply surrender now. The tension in the cabin thickened, hanging in the air like a storm about to break. The flight attendant, still wearing that tight professional smile, signaled to another crew member. Within moments, a second attendant arrived, younger, with an eagerness that bordered on arrogance. "Sir, we really need you to move," the new attendant said, his tone carrying a forced patience. "We have a system for priority passengers, and unfortunately, this seat wasn't meant for you." Darius held their gaze, his face unreadable. He had been through this dance before, in different settings, with different players, but always with the same choreography. The implication was always the same: you don't belong here. But there was something about this particular moment, about the way the man standing next to him smirked, arms folded as if he already knew how this would end, that ignited a fire within him. "I paid for this seat," he said again, his voice calm, deliberate. "It's mine." The older man scoffed. "Come on, let's not make a big deal out of this." A few heads turned, some passengers shifting in their seats, debating whether to intervene or pretend they weren't listening. "Sir," the first attendant said, her patience clearly running thin, "we can offer you a seat in business class. It's still a premium experience." Darius almost laughed. The language of power was always so polite when it was pushing you out. He could accept the offer, take the upgrade, and pretend that nothing had happened. But that would be a victory for the system, a validation of the prejudice that had plagued him his entire life. His fingers brushed against his phone, resting in his lap. One call. That's all it would take. He knew exactly who to dial, exactly which name would make them straighten their backs and regret every word that had left their mouths. But he waited. Final chance. The younger attendant said, his voice hardening. "If you don't move, we may have to escalate this." Darius smiled, slow and knowing, and lifted the phone to his ear. "Go ahead," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "Let's escalate." Chapter 2. The Price of Principle. The phone barely had time to ring once before a voice answered on the other end, calm, measured, yet carrying the weight of someone who made decisions that mattered. "Jefferson," the voice said. Darius didn't need to explain much, just a name, a flight number, and a quiet, "It's happening again." That was all. As he lowered the phone, the energy in the cabin shifted. The attendants exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence beginning to wane. They had expected compliance, perhaps irritation, but not this quiet assurance that he was not a man to be dismissed. Passengers who had been pretending not to listen now openly watched, some murmuring to one another, their curiosity outweighing their discomfort. The older white man beside him, the so-called priority passenger, was growing impatient, his foot tapping against the carpeted floor, his arms folded tighter across his chest. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough to be heard. "This is ridiculous." It didn't take long. The flight attendant's earpiece buzzed. She pressed a hand to it, her expression stiffening as she listened. Then, without another word, she pivoted and hurried toward the cockpit. The second attendant, the one who had spoken so smugly moments before, suddenly looked unsure. "Sir, if you could just—" A sharp voice cut through the cabin. "Everyone, please remain seated. We will be delaying takeoff briefly." Passengers exchanged glances. Delays were expected, but this felt different. There was an edge in the pilot's voice, an urgency that was unsettling. Then, the real shift happened. A man in a Navy suit strode down the aisle with quick, clipped steps. He wasn't a flight attendant, not a regular airport worker. This was someone higher up. His name tag gleamed under the cabin lights. Mr. Hayes, regional manager, and his presence alone was enough to make the two attendants step back, as if burned. The manager's gaze locked on Darius. Sharp, assessing, but there was something else in his eyes. Recognition. "Mr. Jefferson," the manager said, his voice tight. "I'm so sorry for this misunderstanding." A ripple of reaction moved through the cabin. People glanced at one another, the name echoing in their minds, trying to place it. Darius only tilted his head slightly, watching the manager with measured patience. "Like a misunderstanding," he repeated, his voice deceptively soft. The man in the suit, probably mid-level management, someone important enough to clean up messes, but not powerful enough to prevent them, cleared his throat. "This is not how we treat our passengers, and I sincerely apologize. I can assure you the staff involved will be dealt with appropriately." The younger flight attendant paled. The woman beside him took a small step away, as if physically distancing herself from the consequences. Darius exhaled slowly, running a hand along the armrest of his seat. "Interesting," he mused, because it seemed pretty intentional. The manager flinched. "Sir, I assure you." Darius held up a hand, silencing him. Now, the whispers were louder. Someone pulled out their phone. A camera flash flickered. Someone was recording. The weight of social media hung in the air like a waiting storm. The manager noticed too. He straightened, adjusting his tie, trying to salvage the moment before it spiraled further. "Please allow me to personally oversee this situation, Mr. Jefferson. We will ensure your flight experience remains." Darius turned, finally looking at the man who had tried to take his seat. But it conveyed more than words ever could. "That's the point, isn't it?" The man's mouth opened, then shut. His face flushed red. Another voice interrupted. The captain had emerged from the cockpit, his uniform pristine, his expression unreadable. He glanced at the manager, then at Darius, and nodded once. "This situation has been escalated," the captain announced, his voice carrying over the cabin. "Effective immediately, this flight crew is being relieved of their duties for this flight." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the passengers. The attendants stiffened. The manager nodded, tight-lipped. "Your seats will remain as they are, Mr. Jefferson. And as for our staff," his gaze swept over the two attendants, his disappointment sharp, "we'll be making changes." Darius could feel the energy shifting again. The whispers now carried something else. Approval. Vindication. He leaned back in his seat, letting out a slow breath. He had seen injustices brushed aside too many times, seen moments like this end with nothing more than empty apologies. But this time, the weight had fallen on the right shoulders. The attendants gathered their things in stunned silence. The man who had tried to take his seat now stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. Then a voice from a few rows back, hesitant but strong. "Good for you, man." Another person nodded. "Yeah, about time someone stood their ground." A woman in business attire lifted her phone, tapping at the screen. "This is already trending," she murmured. Darius didn't need to check. He knew how these stories spread. The world was watching. As the last of the disgraced staff exited the plane, the manager turned back to him one final time. "Mr. Jefferson, if there's anything else we can do..." Darius's gaze flicked to the man who had tried to take his seat. "Maybe you'd like to volunteer for an economy seat instead." The man's face burned red. The manager hesitated for only a second before nodding to another attendant, the new one replacing the others. "Find him another seat." The man sputtered, protesting, but no one was listening anymore. As Darius settled back into his seat, the announcement came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff." The engines roared to life. The runway stretched out ahead, endless and open. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. This time, things had gone differently. This time, justice had landed exactly where it belonged. Chapter 3. The Ripple Effect. The plane had taken off, but the storm wasn't over. Not yet. Darius kept his posture relaxed, but his mind was still turning, still processing. He could feel the weight of eyes on him. Curious, approving, some even admiring. That wasn't why he had done it. He had learned a long time ago that standing up wasn't about recognition. It was about the ones who never got the chance, the ones whose voices were never heard. The flight moved along in quiet murmurs. Passengers typed on their phones, whispering to one another about what had just happened. The flight attendants, the new ones, moved through the aisles, their smiles measured, their movements careful. They knew they were being watched. Darius turned to the window, watching the clouds roll past. Then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Sir," he turned, and there was the manager again, looking more composed now, but still carrying the weight of the moment. "I just wanted to apologize again. Personally," he said. "Situations like this, they shouldn't happen, and we take them seriously." Darius studied him for a moment. "Is that right?" The manager nodded. "There will be an internal review. The employees involved will no longer work for this airline. And moving forward, we will be making serious policy changes." Darius exhaled slowly. He had heard promises before. Words were easy. Change wasn't. But then, the manager lowered his voice. "I know this doesn't fix what happened, but because of this, things will be different." Darius held his gaze for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "See that they are." The manager hesitated, then offered his hand. Darius shook it firm, steady. As the manager walked away, Darius leaned back into his seat, glancing around the cabin. Somewhere, someone was watching. Somewhere, someone was thinking about their own battles, their own moments of injustice. And maybe, just maybe, the next time it happened to them, they'd know they weren't alone. The flight landed smoothly, but the ripple effects of what had happened midair were just beginning. Darius stood, stretching his legs, feeling the shift in energy around him. People weren't just passing by him anymore. They were acknowledging him. A nod from a businessman, a quiet thank you from a young woman near the exit. Even the pilot, standing by the door, gave him a knowing glance. As he stepped into the airport, his phone vibrated. He glanced down. 2 million views. The video had spread like wildfire. Headlines were already rolling in. First-class passenger denied seat until he made one call. Racial discrimination on flights? How one man exposed it in real time. Justice at 30,000 feet. Darius sighed, slipping the phone into his pocket. He hadn't asked for the attention, but maybe, just maybe, it would mean fewer stories like his. As he walked through the terminal, the world watching from their screens, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about him. It never had been. This was about every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And today, at least for a moment, justice had found its seat. Chapter 4. Echoes in the Terminal. The airport terminal was a whirlwind of reunions, departures, and hurried connections. Darius navigated the chaos, his senses attuned to the subtle shifts in energy. He could feel the weight of the viral video, the awareness of his actions rippling through the crowds. Some people stared openly, whispering to their companions. Others offered furtive glances, their faces etched with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He spotted his driver, Marcus, a burly man with a kind face and a quiet demeanor, holding a sign with his name. Marcus had been with him for years, a trusted confidant and a steady presence in his often turbulent life. "Welcome back, Mr. Jefferson," Marcus said, offering a warm smile. "Heard you had a bit of a trip." Darius chuckled. "You could say that." They collected his luggage and headed toward the exit. As they walked, Darius noticed a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, staring at him. She hesitated for a moment, then approached him. "Mr. Jefferson?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling. I saw the video. I just wanted to say thank you." Darius stopped, surprised. "Thank you? For what?" "For standing up," she said, her eyes shining with emotion. "For showing them that they can't just treat people like that. I've experienced similar things. It's not easy." Darius smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "It's not easy," he agreed. "But it's worth it. It gives me hope," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me hope." She turned and walked away, leaving Darius with a profound sense of satisfaction. He hadn't set out to be a hero, but he had inadvertently inspired someone, given them the courage to face their own challenges. That, he realized, was more valuable than any accolade or recognition. As they drove away from the airport, Darius reflected on the events of the day. He had stood his ground, fought for his dignity, and won. But the victory was more than just personal. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been marginalized, discriminated against, or told they didn't belong. He knew that the fight for justice was far from over. There were still countless battles to be fought, countless injustices to be righted. But he was ready. He was prepared to use his voice, his platform, and his resources to make a difference in the world. The car pulled up to his apartment building, a sleek, modern high-rise in the heart of downtown. The doorman, a friendly old man named Mr. Henderson, greeted him with a knowing smile. "Welcome home, Mr. Jefferson," Mr. Henderson said. "Heard you made a bit of a splash on the way back." Darius grinned. "You could say that." He took the elevator to his penthouse apartment, a spacious and luxurious space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the city. He walked through the rooms, feeling a sense of peace and contentment wash over him. He was home, safe, and surrounded by the comforts he had earned. But he knew that he couldn't afford to become complacent. He had a responsibility to use his privilege to help others, to create opportunities for those less fortunate, and to fight for a more just and equitable world. He walked over to the window, gazing out at the city lights twinkling below. He thought of the young woman he had met at the airport, the one who had thanked him for giving her hope. He knew that there were countless others like her, struggling against injustice, fighting for their place in the world. And he knew that he couldn't let them down. He had to keep fighting, keep speaking out, keep standing up for what was right. He was Darius Jefferson, and he was ready to take flight again.